This is the first meeting of this legislative body of the the Lower Pearl River Basin Task Force. We haven't met in several years, essentially because there hasn't been a tremendous amount in terms of scope in terms of what's been going on the river, and any real major changes. However, in recent times, they talk about possible reservoir and some other issues upriver have kind of basically brought us back together again. We have the DEIS report that just came out from the Corps, which is the draft environmental impact statement. We have a couple of members today from the we have let's see, Andrew Whitehurst is here today with the Healthy Gulf. He's the water program director. And then we also have Abby Brahman, who's the executive director of Pearl River Keeper, who are going to speak today. And then we'll take any information from the public. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and just have the members here just introduce themselves and just a brief statement. That way we can just kind of know who's on this task force today. But in the meantime, Madam Secretary, let's go ahead and take a roll.
Senator Owen?
Here.
Present. Representative Baralt?
Here.
Present. Tyler Bosworth?
Patrick Banks for Tyler Bosworth from Wildlife and Fisheries.
Okay. Mr. Banks, present. Brian Lazina?
Here.
Present. Edward Knight? Keith Lavelle? Marion Murgist?
Jeffrey Onick for DEQ and Marion.
Okay. Randall Paulsina? Present. Alex Sumrall? 5 members are present. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Okay, we'll go ahead and start on this end. If you want to get started, just introduce yourself in a couple words.
Sure. Brian Lazina, Administrator for the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. Had the privilege of interacting with this group a while ago. Also represent the state's interest as far as some of the downstream concerns we have in Louisiana, working with Andrew a long time. And I grew up in Slidell, so very familiar with the area and all the issues around. So pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Patrick Banks, I'm representing Wildlife and Fisheries. I'm an administrator in the Fisheries Management Division of the department. I've been with the agency about 24 years and was around when the very first project was proposed up in Jackson. I think it was called the Two Lakes project. And it's been a long time managing oysters for the state, so I'm very concerned about downstream impacts from changes in timing and volume of river flow.
So I'm Senator Owen from District 1, which encompasses Slidell and the bulk of the Lower Pearl River Basin Lower Pearl River Basin. Grew up actually right next to the Pearl. Have seen many of the changes that have happened on the river. I remember one in particular is Waukeya Bluff when they put that project in. In 1 week after that happened, we actually 13 bayous downstream dried up. So I know the impacts of what human intervention can do to a river system, and I'm glad to be the chair of this committee. And thank you very much.
Representative Stephanie Baralt. I represent District 76, which the district is bordered with the Pearl River. I just want to say a thank you to Parish President Cooper for allowing us to use this space, to the entire team who drove over from Baton Rouge. We appreciate all the support, and a very special thank you to those of you who came in from Mississippi and from all of you who have been working on this for a long time. I've lived in the area for 20 years, but I'm new to this room on this issue, and so I'm just really grateful for all the work that's been done before, and I appreciate you being here to kind of update us and fill us in and educate me and those who might also be new to the room. But just really grateful for all that you all have already done on behalf of this project. Thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Jeff Corbin. I'm on the Parish Council, District 13. So I have the area that, one of the areas that's mostly affected by anything with the Pearl River. I butt up to the Pearl River at Mississippi and go all the way to the New Orleans line. Been in the parish for 40 years. I live in Quail Ridge, so we actually butt up against the Pearl River. So again, that's space that I'm very, very familiar with. I'm not familiar with this very much with this task force, so I'm looking forward to being educated today. Like Stephanie, learn about what the challenges are that we're dealing with. I was familiar with the One Lake project years ago when it came up, but I'm not up to speed on what the current state is, so I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Afternoon. My name is David Kugel. I'm a councilman for District 9, St. Tammany Parish. I have about 18 miles north to south along Military Road and into Pearl River, just bordering Pearl River, the actual river, all along the way. This particular issue is very big interest to my constituents and myself as well.
This one? Can you tell I'm not used to being up here? And I live in Madisonville, and my previous position was regional manager in Harahan, so I'm very familiar with the lower Pearl River, as I took many a water sample down there from where it enters Louisiana down to the mouth, and I'm very interested in the project and with what we have to hear here today. Thank you.
Randy Pausina, I'm the coastal manager for St. Tammany Parish, sitting in for President Mike Cooper. We have a lot of really important projects on the Pearl River. It's a hugely important river system for recreational, our businesses on that side of the parish, as well as just recreational uses. So we're very interested.
Jimmy Strickland, Parish Councilman, District 14. And part of Slidell and Pearl River. I'm a lifelong Slidellian, and I'm here just to, some of these things will affect, the Pearl River would affect some of my constituents, so I'm here just to gain the knowledge of it.
Okay, so again, thank you for everybody for coming out today. Thank you, President Cooper, for allowing us to use the space, and thank you, staff, by the way, for helping put this on at such short notice. It was kind of imperative that we did this at this time, since the public comment period for the DEIS report and statement is coming up shortly. So. At this time, let's go ahead and get our speakers up and have our presentations. Would Ms. Brahman or Mr. Whitehurst like to go first? And just a little work here. We have to make sure that y'all fill out a white card too before you finish up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Representative Baralt, and thank you, Senator Owen, for putting this together, and thank you all for coming today to hear about this draft environmental impact statement. I'm Andrew Whitehurst, Water Program Director at Healthy Gulf. I'm a New Orleanian from a long time ago, but I've been in Jackson for 26 years. This project is a flood risk management project it's been called the One Lake Project. It's got a long history, and I'm going to go through some of the issues that we've seen with this new DEIS. And it's 4,000 pages if you count the appendices, but the main body is about 200 pages. I'm with Healthy Gulf. It's an environmental advocacy group focused on the Gulf of Mexico. We're active in 5 Gulf states. And this little graphic has got the river, the estuary, and the Gulf, and the connections between them are important to us, and we're talking about the river part of it today. There are rivers on either side of us in Florida and in Texas that are showing the signs of too many dams and water withdrawals. We've got the Flint and Chattahoochee River system to the east, and as a result, Apalachicola Bay has got oyster harvest restrictions because it's too saline down there. There are rivers in Texas that don't reach the coastal estuaries. So while the Pearl River only has one dam and lake on it of size, the more of these that you place on rivers, the more complicated things get for downstream flow and sediment transport and the ecology and the users as well. The history of flooding on the Pearl River is that we've had big destructive floods in 1979, 1983, and recently in 2020 and 2022, there were floods that got into people's homes. The Ross Barnett Reservoir is not designed as a flood control reservoir. It doesn't store very much water. Its pool stays at 297 feet above sea level, and when the pool reaches 300 feet above sea level, the dam goes beyond its capabilities. So they do what they can with that 3 feet of freeboard, but it's not a flood control reservoir that can store water. There was a project called the Chaco Dry Dam introduced in the 1980s to prevent large inflows into the upper reservoir. That was voted down because it was not acceptable due to condemnation of property. The Corps of Engineers presented a 1996 levee plan to Jackson, and that was not accepted by the city. So there's been no flood control implemented on this river in 40 years. This is the Pearl River watershed. You've got 11 counties in Mississippi and 2 parishes in Louisiana, and arguably 3 because St. Bernard Parish receives the influence of the Pearl in its marshes and its estuaries in Lake Borgne. This is a schematic of the project area in the middle, that kind of shaded long rectangle, and up to the right is the Ross Barnett Reservoir. So there are about 8 or 9 miles between the reservoir and what would be the top of the project area. And Interstate 55 crosses this, and so does Interstate 20. That's sort of the crosshairs where this project sits. The flooding problem in Jackson, I describe it this way. The problem is how to release water from the Barnett Reservoir after heavy upper basin rains without causing back flooding up the urban creeks below the dam, or sending water over the existing levees, or pushing the dam beyond its capabilities. So that's the problem they try to solve every time a low pressure system sits on the upper Pearl watershed, or a hurricane passes through, or big cold fronts pass through, or other large precipitation events. The history of this is that there were first 2 lakes discussed. The Corps decided in 2008 that the 2-lake project was too expensive. It did not meet the Corps' benefit-cost ratios, and they rejected that project then, but they declined to sponsor any more lake projects. So they told the local levee board, which is the Rankin-Hines Pearl River Flood and Drainage Control District, that if that board wanted to go forward, it could do so under Section 211 of the Water Resources Development Act. So it got permission from Congress to self-fund its studies and go forward with the Corps oversight, but primarily this levee board or drainage district has been the one doing all the NEPA work, producing the environmental impact statements. So scoping for this portion began in 2013, this single lake project. The draft environmental impact statement was published in 2018. There were lots of comments, including from St. Tammany Parish and the state agencies in Louisiana. And the Army Corps has just published the newest version of the draft environmental impact statement. The Corps took over writing of the project, but it's been under a memorandum of agreement with the local sponsor the whole time. Here are the alternatives that may comply with the National Environmental Policy Act. There's always a no-action alternative. Alternative A1 is a non-structural plan, which in the draft environmental impact statement, it's said to possibly be the National Economic Development Plan, the NED plan, the one with the best benefit to cost ratio, but they don't come out and nail down one alternative or another. It's non-structural, elevations, flood proofing, possible buyouts. It requires no mitigation for environmental damage. Alternative C is the lake development as it's been for the last 10 years, excavating inside and outside of the river channel, removing the overbank, they call it, which shaving the banks down is another way to look at it, and widening the flow area of the river. Building a new weir, creating a 10-mile-long, 2,000-acre lake, which would involve a lot of filling of riparian lands along the river. That is the locally preferred plan. It was voted on by the Drainage District, the non-federal sponsor, back in 2008 or so. It's always been the locally preferred plan. And there are two combination plans that are put forward in this document. Both involve dredging the banks. So combination CTO-D, or combination D, excavate the banks, build a new weir that would hold a pool at 256 feet above sea level, and create an 8-mile-long, 1,700-acre lake. And recreation land would be built behind the levees with the dredge spoil from the dredging of the banks. So that's a weir and a lake. And CTO-E is doing all the same excavation, but not putting a weir and not creating a lake. So there's a wet combination, D, and a dry combination plan, E. And both of those, D and E, offer some non-structural features. This is a picture of the alternative C. You can see the orange areas around the perimeter of the lake are the spoil deposition areas, the areas behind levees where new land would be built. This has got a dam just south of Interstate 20, the red road that crosses the last quarter of the project. This would fill 1,861 acres along the perimeter, and it would coincidentally dredge almost 100 acres of a state park in doing the project. There are habitats protected for 3 species in that section: the Gulf sturgeon, the ringed sawback map turtle, and the Pearl River map turtle. And those 2 turtles are endemics to the Pearl River. This is CTO-D, which is another lake, looks a lot like the one we just saw. Those brown polygons around the edges of it, it's kind of a fuzzy picture. I'm sorry about the quality, but those brown polygons are the deposition areas to put the new land behind the levees. And that's an 8-mile-long lake. The other one was 10. And this feature is a diagram of what the new land deposition would look like. Those fill areas, the light brown areas, would create 500 to 1,000 foot wide terraces on the backs of the levees. And it's said to be for recreation, but it's also listed to be for future economic development. It's very general the way this is discussed in the draft document, but the main purpose they state is recreation, but I think everybody knows it will be for future development. And 3 of the 4 alternatives have this feature. So the 2 lakes do this, and the dredging without building the weir does this as well. So this new land is very important in 3 of the 4 alternatives. Last summer, the scoping meetings for this happened in Slidell at the high school auditorium. And this is a summary of some of the issues that came up during the scoping process by the commenters there. They were concerned about bank caving and land loss from reservoir operations, and that's in Washington Parish and in St. Tammany. The timing of the reservoir releases and the storm surges was something that people brought to the attention of the Corps. Shoaling in the river, sediment management problems, saltwater intrusion up the Pearl during low flow periods. At the time, it was commented that modeling should include all the estuaries down to Lake Bourne. And the parish comments made this statement that additional headwater reductions are environmentally unacceptable, and that was from the St. Tammany Parish Engineering Department's 2018 comments. Also in that comment letter, the statement risk of sewer plants or permitted dischargers violating during low flow was made. And that's the waste load allocation violations. And in the Temple Inland plant in 2009 or 2010 had the big spill, and it was during low flow periods in the summer, which was devastating for the fish and the aquatic life. In the DEIS, there's some new and different modeling. The flow modeling done in this new document from 2024 is HEC-RAS unsteady state. And that's a little bit different than the modeling done in the 2018 DEIS. They updated this model with more data. And what it says is that for induced flooding, flooding caused by the project, by the additional head of CTOD, they expect the effects to be seen only 32 miles down the Pearl River at River Mile 200, which is in a place called Georgetown in Copiah County. But they also make the statement that further analysis is needed to evaluate impacts from a 100-year flood to the coastal areas of Louisiana and Mississippi. So some of these analyses are kicked to later, to the pre-construction engineering and design phase. And that's one of the weaknesses of this document. So many things are pushed to PED, including that analysis for induced flooding all the way to the coast. Sediment and water quality studies are left until later at the the pre-construction stage. The document does take up climate change. The 2018 document didn't deal with it at all. And for climate change, it looked at precipitation and made the statement that an annual decreasing trend is predicted for precipitation from 2023 to 2100. Drought indicators indicate more days of consecutive dry days, dry periods. And stream flow was said to be steady to reduced flow trends in those years. And despite these things, which all sort of point down, they stated that no separate model, they didn't have a separate model for low flow results. And the report stated that climate change and impact to precipitation won't affect flow frequency during the life of the project. So it's kind of disappointing to see those conclusions in this document. The authority that this is being done under comes from two separate WRDA, Water Resources Development Act congressional laws. The first one is the 2007 WRDA, and in this one, the Army Secretary is given some leeway to choose among plans. You see that there's Plan C, Plan A1, and then the combination plans. So the Army Secretary is supposed to compare the level of flood damage reduction by the National Economic Development Plan and the locally preferred plan. And then if the locally preferred plan provides the same as or more flood protection than the NED plan, the one with the best benefit to cost ratio, then the Army Secretary looks at whether they're environmentally acceptable and technically feasible. If so, he can construct any of those plans. The LPP, the locally preferred, or the NED, the National Economic Development, or combination plan. So there's a lot of leeway given to the Army Secretary for Civil Works, and it's one man's pen that will sign this document to make it go forward. that's the bottleneck here, is that decision by the Secretary. And in 2018, there's some more WRDA language was put in that affected this project. Senator Cassidy and Representative Scalise added language in 2018 to say also that this had to be economically justified and that the Corps needed to look at adverse downstream impacts. That language had a 5-year sunset on it. So in 2018, it looked like, you know, certainly in 5 years they'd get this done. But at sunset, the language went away in October of 2023. But this project had begun scoping before that. This project had begun scoping in June. So what happens to this language about taking a hard look at downstream impacts? I mean, that's a question, because in the document, there's not a special section that responds to this WRDA language that Senator Cassidy and Representative Scalise put in the WRDA. So that's a question about how has the Corps responded to those pieces of WRDA language that, you know, this is done under their authority. We have 2 documents that have come out. We have I'm pointing over here at the table, but this is the binder with all the report in it. We have that, and we have the commander's report, and both of those lack any hint of what they did with the Scalise-Cassidy language. So that would be something to bring up. This document has a section called opportunities, and those opportunities are a response to some of the comments that were heard last year in June, I believe, Slidell and in Jackson. And one of the comments was to have a study of the whole Pearl system before we undertake any more changes on it. So in the DEIS and in the commander's report, comprehensive watershed study is mentioned as necessary to fully understand the hydrology, hydrodynamics, and the ecosystem. And they also ask, they say a suggestion would be that the states get together and talk about conveyance requirements through the lower Pearl, things like water budget, and come up with a comprehensive way to look at the use of the water in the Pearl, low flow problems. The only trouble is that comprehensive watershed study is not authorized now. It would be something that the states would have to get separate authorization to do. But if you're going to sequence these things, certainly the study should come first, and then figure out, based on how we understand the Pearl to work now with all the alterations that are on it, then go forward with looking at flood plans, whether it's non-structural, whether it's some combination. Study should come first. The caveat to that is that the non-federal sponsor, the Rankin-Hines Flood Control District, was granted expedited review of this project in 2016, and they're not going to wait. They're in a hurry to get this thing signed by the Army Assistant Secretary for Civil Works. And everybody knows in the mid-Mississippi area that the non-federal sponsor wants a lake. And it has come out in this draft document that alternative C is not justified because it's too expensive. The traditional one lake, the 10-mile version of this. But CTO-D is being given support, you know, since the word came out that alternative D is not going to meet, alternative C is not going to meet core benefit cost regs. So the weight and the support are now going behind CTO-D. So from the viewpoint of the parish and the agencies, these are the things that you could ask for. One, a coastal zone consistency review at the state agency level. Also ask that the plan formulation avoids the weir and the lake options. You know, ask the Corps and the sponsor to go back to the drawing board with non-structural Plan A and maybe add things to that non-structural Plan A. There's a possibility of a ring levy that can make that stronger and protect more neighborhoods up in Jackson. So also to investigate the acceptability of the non-structural alternatives. In the draft document, Alternative A, the non-structural alternative, is discussed, but the writers doubt whether there's going to be adequate participation. And so while it might be the National Economic Development Plan, the NED plan, there's some doubt that they sow in the writing of the document about whether homeowners will participate in the non-structural flood-proofing elevations and buyouts. But they haven't been asked also. The landowners and the property owners, homeowners have not been surveyed. So the Corps is thinking for them, but we haven't heard from them. And the non-structural plans can begin now with the existing funds that have been appropriated to this project. In the first IIJA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, allowed $221 million to go towards Pearl River flood protection. And that was something that I believe Senator Wicker put in. So the money is there that could cover Alternative A1 at this point. And the other plans are much more expensive and would require more authorization from Congress. So asking Congress to authorize the watershed study is something that the parish and the agencies could and should do as well. Some of the other aspects of the project area is that there are toxic waste sites in the project area. 3 of them would get cut into during the dredging of any of the alternatives. The city of Jackson's 8 urban tributaries that hit the Pearl River all have sewage inflow problems, and the city is under an agreed order from the DEQ and EPA, and there's also a water contact advisory that's been in place for 5 years on the Pearl River because of bacteria from these failing sewage systems. And that's one of the urban creeks, Eubanks Creek, that's gone completely eutrophic. It's got an algae bloom on it because of a sewer main upstream of it. That was October, and that's a very shaded stream, and it's pea green. There's flash flooding up there along the urban tributaries that would be worsened by any of the projects that raise the water level behind a new weir. And this is the Gulf sturgeon that's got critical habitat all the way up to the toe of the Ross Barnett Dam. And it does go through the project area. These fish are going over the weirs in the lower part of the river and making it all the way to the Ross Barnett. Not lots of them, but they've been pinged with tracking tags all the way to the dam. This is the ringed sawback nap turtle, one of the other species that's got critical habitat in the section, and we believe there are between 1,000 and 1,800 of these individuals in the section that would be dredged. And they're breeding in there. We see young in the surveys, so they're doing okay in that section of the river. It's not degraded habitat as far as the turtles are concerned. It's got all the things they need, the sandbars to nest and the snags to bask on. The update on the DEIS review, the Army Secretary for Civil Works began document review in July of 2022. That the agency technical review ended in October of 2022. A special issue resolution team was put together with staff from 3 different Corps districts, New Orleans, Memphis, and Vicksburg. And pretty much since that time, they have been in an iterative back and forth response to comment process with the local sponsor, the Drainage District from Rankin and Hinds counties. And the Vicksburg District published this document on the 7th. And the comment period was just extended at the end of last week until August the 6th. It came out with a 45-day comment period, but the extension gave another 15. There is a first virtual meeting, public meeting that the Corps is holding this Thursday night. These are the details. It's a WebEx meeting. I think they said that comments can go in the chat. I don't think they have ways to let people speak in this meeting, and that's in your packet. I think I added that virtual meeting to the last page of this 3-page handout that you have, so you can find the information to dial in or log in. This picture shows the counties and parishes with resolutions against the project back in 2018. So the lower river's not happy with this project and never has been. I think St. Tammany Parish has 2 or 3 different resolutions starting back in 2004 and 5. The state of Louisiana passed a joint House-Senate resolution against lake building on the Pearl in 2018. It was a Senate-House joint resolution, and last year's legislative session saw a Senate resolution against the project. So the legislature has spoken 2 different times. I believe the authors were Melinda White and Senator Sharon Hewitt in both cases, if you need to look up authors of the past pieces of legislation. And the overall question is, why should Congress fund this, adding a dam and a new lake to the river, when flood control options exist that don't block its channel further, don't disrupt its riparian habitats, and don't cause flow problems downstream, and are less objectionable to downstream interests. A1 could be done with existing funds, but we all know that it's going to be sniped at by the folks in central Mississippi and the sponsors, but it's there, and it should be investigated further. And that's what I've got for you. I'll be happy to answer questions. And then Abby Brayman, the Pearl River Keeper Executive Director, has got a lot of experience in the last 2.5 weeks reading this document. So if I can't answer it, Abby can probably answer it. But I'll be happy to take questions or more discussion. But I appreciate you all letting me come and present about this project. Overall, the more of these impoundments you put on a river system, the more complicated things get downstream. I think that's the simple way to look at it.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming today and speaking to us. It's, a lot of people I know on this committee have kind of seen some of this information for the first time. Of course, I've been dealing with this issue back when it was 2 lakes 20 years ago. So, we have some people on this committee that have a little more understanding of it. But it's some of the things I know coming up through the years have been silting down the river, especially with the low flow. I know that in the past, I have not read the entire report yet. But the DAIS, but there was in previous reports there was no mention of evaporation rates and things along those lines. And then the saltwater intrusion issue is a huge issue for us. We have we still have a very good amount of fresh water coming through our marshland lands, and the Pearl is relatively healthy downstream. But if we start getting intrusion up, it's we've seen that happen throughout Louisiana and other river systems, and it can be devastating in terms of environmental impact and also coastal protection from hurricanes. So that's some of our big issues. I know we have a couple questions though from our staff, and just want to thank you again for coming out today. Appreciate it.
I wanted to say that you have a valuable resource in Dr. Diet Smythe, who wrote the comments in 2018. She's sitting right there. PhD in engineering, and she and I talked a lot during that comment writing period, and I tried to help her find data that she was looking for, but she has looked at the flow miss rates, looking at the low flow limits at different stations down the Pearl River and how many times the river discharge has missed or gone below those rates over the life of the life of the Ross Barnett Reservoir. And nothing in the DEIS document talks about the times that the river system is missing its low flow targets. But she is on top of that, and she will write good comments this time. But she's been a good partner.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for all of this. And this, my first question might actually be better. I'm sorry. Tell your name. Okay, so it might be better. But my first question about low water and about the Ross Barnett, I guess, big picture, how big is this proposed lake going to be compared to that? But more importantly, what has been some long-term impact studies from the Ross Barnett going in before and after in terms of low water? Because there's a lot of conversation about high water, but from what little bit I've seen, low water is almost a bigger issue, and how that's been affected in the past. And I don't know if you want to.
The reservoir is 38,000 acres, and the project is going to be 1,700 acres for the relative size between the Ross Barnett Reservoir and this 10-mile section.
Okay.
So, it's much smaller than the Ross Barnett Reservoir. And Diet can speak to the other part.
We had calculated, the developers came in and spoke with us years ago when they were scoping out when they released the first DEIS. We had estimated about 35 cubic feet per second loss from evaporation just from the 1,700 acre lake. And the minimum flow out of Ross Barnett is 170. So that's 20%.
I'm sorry, could you introduce yourself?
2%. Sorry, Diet Smythe.
Thank you.
Anyway, it's a pretty significant reduction in flow just at the weir of the Ross Barnett. So, and in fact, if you look at the before and the after construction of the Ross Barnett, we have reduced. EPA and FEMA use a 10th percentile to characterize low flow. The Ross Barnett itself has an MOU with the Corps and the state of Louisiana that they have to meet that 170 cubic feet per second target. They failed at least 10% of the time. And that results in some low flow catastrophes like the black liquor flow at the International Paper Mill, or was Templin Inland at the time.
Certainly very concerning.
Yes.
And any further lakes, any further damming is going to just exacerbate what's already there.
Yes, exactly.
Thank
Good
you.
point.
I appreciate it. Okay, my second question, on the non-structural piece, we are having conversations in this area with the Army Corps of Engineers New Orleans office about some flood storm surge protection, and one of the options that they keep giving to us is the non-structural is a big component of the plan. I have never once heard an Army Corps of Engineer person say, oh, well, we'll just not do that because people might not comply. Have you ever heard that before as a viable option to just not do a plan because people might not comply?
No, I mean, it was underselling what they've published. I haven't heard that. Part of the problem with this document is that the editorial process was shared with the local sponsor. And we see the local sponsor's fingerprints, throughout the document. So I'm sure there was some struggles over what was said and how it was said before this was published on the 7th. So, that language that discounts A1 is some of it. They go forward in comparing the CTO plans, and they do some assumptions saying If 15% of the high cost of both of them could be shaved off, then D might also be the NED plan, the plan that they want. So not only do they discount A1, the non-structural, they do some assumptions and opinions on the other two as well. And it's the process. It was how it was written. I think there was a lot of frustration from the Vicksburg district. I'm just reading that into the document, but
Is that typical, to your knowledge, for the local sponsor to have that much influence over the wording of a report?
it all depends on how the local sponsor and the Corps frame their working relationship. And the local sponsor has been very careful to reserve power in the editing and the ATR process, and they've been tenacious about their will.
Clearly. Okay, final question. The fill that's going to go around the levees that you said they have mainly recreational but also potential economic development. Is there any flood protection purpose to the fill, to your knowledge?
The flood protection doesn't come from the weir building, and that is admitted in the document. Come out and say a weir does not add flood control. The flood control comes from the dredging and cutting down of those banks to make the water pass in a wider and somewhat deeper path. But the land on the back doesn't have flood control benefits. It's the spoil cut out to make flood control benefits, but put someplace else. So I don't know, you could argue that the end product of the spoil getting deposited on the outside of the levees is part of what they're doing to increase the river's ability to move water. But the land is just going to be recreational or development land. And it's outside of the levee. Anyway.
Thank you. You answered the question.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, I had one question about that 5-year sunset. Do we have any idea why that was put in as a sunset clause, the Kennedy Scalise in 2018?
I don't
Is there
know.
a legal reason that had to sunset?
I don't know.
Okay.
Other than thinking that 5 years was surely enough time to get this DEIS to the next stage, I don't know why the 5-year sunset was put in.
Is there a credible argument that as you reference here, that the scoping study began in June prior to it sunsetting in October? So shouldn't that requirement have been embedded and maintained then, because they started that process before that sunset took effect?
I think that can be argued for sure.
Okay.
I mean, at the scoping meetings, the 2018 WRDA, extra language from Scalise and Cassidy, was mentioned. It was referenced during their talks at Slidell High School and up in Jackson. So they had to address it in June, but it's frustrating to think that in October, when it sunset, they just simply don't feel an obligation to discuss it anymore, or to say what they did in their report to respond to it.
Right. A little bit like, phew, glad that went away. We waited that out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. And I'm trying to catch up to speed, so I apologize a little bit. But in the transition from former Representative White to myself, she talked extensively about this project and its impact on Washington Parish, and certainly I see the urgency in it. And I don't have a packet in front of me, but did you reference that some of the coastal counties of Mississippi and southern counties of Mississippi have also gone on record in opposition to this project?
They have. Hancock is on record. Pearl River is on record. All the way up to Lawrence County. Actually Copiah. It starts at Copiah. Copiah, Lawrence, Marion, Pearl River, Hancock have all had a Board of Supervisors or parish council level resolution. And some of those are old, and some of the elections have turned over personnel, but they did have it on record in the 2018 timeframe.
So there's some objection within Mississippi, or at least lack of agreement on the project. Do you think it would be beneficial? You mentioned twice prior, the Louisiana legislature's gone on record in opposition to this project. I mean, would it be beneficial next opportunity that we go on record again because of the extensive turnover we've had in our legislature?
It would be good. I don't know if that will come before or after the secretary signs his document. I believe that they're trying to get a record of decision from the Corps before the elections. And the session doesn't start till after the elections, unless you have a special session, right? No, don't say that. You could get together again, but you probably won't until after this record of decision from the Corps comes out. So raising up those two resolutions would be good because they're both about C, and they both apply to CTO-D. So they're great to, dust off and elevate.
Right. And by the way, I'm Representative John Weibel, District 75, which is all of Washington Parish. Final question is then, how weighty then is the impact on the species that are endangered or at least threatened through this?
There are two turtles that have similar biological needs in the section. The ring sawback turtle is more numerous than the Pearl River map turtle. So it would probably hurt the Pearl River map turtle more than it would the ring sawback turtle. All the sandbars go away, and they nest in the sandbars. And then all the snags and dead trees go away, and they bask on those to regulate their body temperature. But as far as raw numbers, there are more of the ring sawback turtles found in the surveys than the Pearl River map turtle. So it would hurt that Pearl River map turtle worse to lose 8 miles of habitat. The sturgeon, back in 2018, it wasn't known that the sturgeon made it through this project area because the tagging had not revealed that. But since that time, these electronic or satellite tags have revealed that the sturgeon makes it up. It's a big adult that they've tagged, and they measured when they tagged her, and they found her going up there twice. In not consecutive years maybe, but certainly 2 of the last 4 years, that fish appeared, moving past the tag and past the station that captures the pings. We don't know if they spawn up there, if they're looking for hard bottom or high oxygenated water, but it could.
Thank you.
It would hurt the turtle worse than anything else, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for this information, and I appreciate your diligence on these projects over all of these years. The question I have, and I can't recall, I seem to recall the Mississippi Marine Resources Commission passing a resolution against the project. Do you recall that, and have you heard anything official from that agency or from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about the potential turtle impacts?
Well, let's see. The Marine Resources Commission made that resolution in 2015, and it kind of broadly talked about upstream damming on coastal rivers, and it was against it. Since that time, the Marine Resources Commission has been turned into an advisory panel only. They don't have voting power. And I'm not sure that the new members are aware of the existence of the resolution. And the other question is what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has said about the turtles. There's a biological opinion from 2018, and there's also a Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act report from 2018, but both of those are being redone. Isn't that right? What?
Abby Brayman with Pearl River Keeper. Thank you all for standing this task force back up. Right, so the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has issued a draft Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act report, and the reason it's only a draft is because they didn't get to see all of the alternative D and E information before they wrote it, so they're in the middle of writing a new one. And they'll also be writing another biological opinion. But in the draft Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act report, which came out with this document, it says specifically in there, it talks about habitat mitigation, and that simply terrestrial mitigation for a lake for the channel improvements could cost $1 billion or more. And they say that doesn't even cover riverine mitigation. They haven't even gone there. And there's no mitigation plan in place right now. They haven't identified locations where they could potentially mitigate for a habitat bank that would cover 10 miles of river somewhere else. So that's another issue that we have, that you could have, CTOD right now has a cost of $500 million, but that's before you would add on $1 billion in habitat mitigation costs.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else have any questions? Okay, well, listen, I thank you very much for coming today. If you have any other comments, please let me know. And just a little, we have to make sure that everybody who has spoken today, make sure to fill out a white card, please.
Sign a card, okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you all very much for assembling on a hot summer afternoon. I appreciate you all and your interest, and thank you for putting this together. Representative Baralt and Senator Owen. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bowman, would you like to give further testimony or speak today? Or?
I just came up to back up my colleague, but I just want to say, so Pearl River Keeper is the local nonprofit that covers Mississippi and Louisiana, the watersheds. We do advocacy work, and so we're happy to be a resource. We've read the document, and we'll be providing comments, and our goal is to just educate the public on the different options. We do river cleanups like the Pearl River Clean Sweep, which covers the entire length of the watershed of 20 different locations, including a fantastic one in Pearl River, Louisiana, and engaged 1,000 people on our first cleanup. So we do that every year, and also water quality monitoring. And like I said, we'll be on working on this DEIS until the end of the public comment period. So happy to be a resource, and thank you for your work.
Quick question, maybe, I'm sorry, Mr. Whitehurst, I'll get you back up again. So in terms of where we need to go from here, I know there's going to be a public comment period in the Slidell area on July 11th at 11 a.m. at the Slidell Auditorium. Would it be beneficial, we can make recommendations to the legislature and to federal agencies, would it be beneficial for the different bodies in the area to go ahead and reissue some of these statements that were made a few years ago, like I know it's like from St. Tammany Parish, and then of course putting another additional resolution into the next queue for if we have a next session, and do some kind of resolution from both the Senate and the House as well. Would that be, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's all good, but like I say, the the Army Secretary is going to sign something in the early fall. At least that's the way things look. But it wouldn't, it wouldn't hurt. Certainly wouldn't hurt to rally the troops at the public meetings. There's only one public meeting down here for the whole Lower Pearl. There's not one in Mississippi. There's just the Slidell meeting at 11 o'clock on the 11th, 11 o'clock on the 11th. So those are hard to get to for a lot of people, but yeah, help with getting folks to those meetings.
So when you say they're going to be signing in the fall, is this definitive that a project will be moving forward at that time, or the funding will be moving forward at that time, or what does that entail exactly?
Wrapping up the end of this NEPA process. That's the National Environmental Policy Act. That's the document that calls for the environmental impact statement. It's desired that whole process wrap up with a record of decision on this EIS this fall. I mean, they're not waiting. I don't know how quickly it'll happen, but certainly before November.
Yes, sir. I did have a question, Councilman Kugel. As I mentioned, I represent Council District 9, which is pretty much 18 miles north to south, all along the Pearl River, pretty much, to the state line. I did have a question, because we talked about the impact to the animals and such. I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit on the impact to people that live along the river. I do have a lot of constituents that go on there, and, they depend on it for food and other stuff, those types of things. And also you do have a lot of people living in actual houses on the river. If this goes through, can you talk about the impact that would cause upon them and other people that live along the river?
Well, from what the document discussed about the 100-year flood, which is the 1% annual exceedance, is that what it is? The 100-year flood, that hasn't been fully modeled all the way down to the coast. So that question about what induced flooding do you expect could be asked. And it's so far down the Pearl system, I don't think the impacts are going to be very easy to tease out from other impacts. But the modeling was not done, in this document. The induced flooding comes from building this lake and adding 6 feet of height to the river. The river right now is around 250 feet above sea level, the pool. That CTO-D plan, the 8-mile lake, would go up to 256. So it's that additional hydraulic head that will induce the flooding. And all they really did was, in the document, was to go to mile 200 with their predictions of what induced flooding might be. So at the very, very bottom of the system, and I think it would be negligible. I wouldn't think it would be a lot. The dredging of the toxic waste sites in Jackson, might lose some slurry and some leachate down the river system. Once they start moving that with dredging, that might be of concern to, people who are eating fish out of it or concerned about what's in the sediment. But at the very, very bottom of the system, right near I-10, I don't think it's going to change what's happening now. Right now you get releases from the Ross Barnett 5 or 6 days before a big front comes or a storm comes or a hurricane. So you get high river and then the storm surge on top of it. That's going to continue. I don't think this is going to moderate that. You're kind of stuck with the way they manage the Pearl with respect to storm surges.
Thank you, Senator Owen. Andrew, thanks. We've been involved in this as well from the state of Louisiana a long time. One thing, and Senator Owen got there a little bit, I picked up on was the schedule. Is there actually a published schedule for the NEPA process? I mean, so usually you'd see a DEIS date, an FEIS date, sometime extended past, because they don't know what they're going to get in comments on there. And generally you won't see a couple-month process like that. So are you aware of any published schedule or estimate?
Anything? The original schedule, Abby said December.
Okay.
But there's not an updated one.
Okay. Still, it's pretty fast regardless. We serve as a non-federal sponsor on quite a few Corps of Engineers projects. We also go through permitting, quite a few Corps of Engineers process, and I would say it does help to update all of those items. They're required to look at those comments, required to address those comments, and the freshness of those comments plays a big part in that, especially when you're addressing this plan. We've made comments along with sister state agencies. We'll do that again this go around because not a lot of different things seen, unfortunately, in this document. But so I just wanted to point out for everybody that is extremely fast to have anything like that or mention like that.
Right, and I would like to point out that it does mention in many places in the DEIS about what the public wants and the public comments. And so the Corps is listening to that and taking it into account, recommending a comprehensive watershed study. They say they can't do it. They have to have separate authorization, but
Yep.
They are listening. And so, yes, it would be very important to kind of counter the kind of narrative in this DEIS that the local sponsor wants this, so we have to do this, and kind of give your perspective of, well, we're on the river as well.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, and certainly I'm not commenting on the quality or impartiality of the Corps, but we're going to look at what we would be required to do in these situations, what we would be required to provide when we're going through the regulatory process, and we're going to ask to make sure all those things are also done in this particular document as well on there. So I think, and then to Representative Baralt's question, non-federal sponsors, there's a wide range, but generally around the economics, the Corps plays that pretty close. So pretty tight on that. So it's something also to think about addressing, like you mentioned, that all the costs are out and open. So.
And there's not a cost or economics appendix that was released with this document. That's one of the first things we look for some charts that line things up so it's easy to compare. It's not in there. So that's one of the other, we're going to bring that up on Thursday night.
Well, without normally you would see a tentatively selected plan, a TSP or some kind of preferred plan, and without that, the comparison becomes difficult on there. Without that information, it's usually, here's what we went and why compared to these other alternatives, sort of ranking those alternatives.
I expect that the knighted plan will appear in the final EIS along with the record of decision. So, but they were very cagey about which one would rise to the top here.
All right, I had a question about I guess a couple questions. Do they have to consider, I know you talked about the low flow, but do they have to consider the induced cost that could pose on a city like Pearl River or Slidell that has any kind of drainage into the river, any kind of stormwater runoff, any of those kind of things in a low flow environment where they can no longer put that material, that water or that flow out into the river? Wouldn't that be an induced cost to that species known as Homo sapiens? And the cost that involves?
Definitely, and that's why having the economic justification, that third leg of analysis was so important in 2018. The one that sunset.
Right.
I mean, that was our hope that lots of economic arguments could be made because it's a working river. You've got, in the Pearl and its tribs, there are almost 100 discharge permits all through both states. Some of them are tiny, but some of them are pretty big. And so, Picayune has two sewage plants that go into the Pearl. Of course, Jackson's got a massive amount of sewage going to the Pearl. So the added treatment costs or the, costs of lost business or whatever.
Well, the mitigations that have to be put in place downstream to protect against those low flow environments, both from a city standpoint, but also from the industry that's along the river that has discharge permits, that's relying on the ability to release into the river. If that's not available anymore, those are a lot of potential mitigation costs that someplace have to be balanced into the equation.
Right.
And it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is they're not currently addressed.
They're not. Did you see anything like that? The Monticello GP plant, paper mill in the town, first major town on the river below Jackson, estimated that it would need $10 million of plant upgrades if the temperature is not within their permit limits. That temperature of the water that comes out of this new project. So they're worried about that, and sort of the mayor of Monticello is worried because of the economic influence of that mill and all the allied businesses that go along with it. So yes, those are certainly.
Okay, and would
Very real.
reaffirmation of the, I guess, the resistance to this project from, for example, St. Tammany Parish Council, City of Slidell, City of Pearl River, City of Picayune, are those reaffirmation just to reaffirm that in 2018 we were against it and now we're against it again? Is that something that would be very
Yes.
beneficial in the process?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you mind speaking just for a second to the status of congressional authorization? My understanding is that alternate one, the non-structural A1, is the only thing that is, the funding lies within their current congressional authorization, and any of these other plans, they're going to need more authorization. Is that accurate?
Because of the increased costs on D, on CTO-D, CTO-E, and regular alternative C, they've gone up so much since the last version of this DEIS that yes, the commander's report that came out said that they would all have to be reauthorized by Congress because of the increase in cost.
And
so they're not authorized now. And I think it's fair to say that the only one that fits in the cost authorization is A1 right now.
Okay, that's my understanding too, and kind of to his point, for them to go back and get additional, even if they sign off and say, you know, this is the one we want what the locals want, to go get additional authorization, they're going to have to do a study to figure out what their true costs are. And I guess my question is, would they typically include all the mitigation up and down the river? Because that's what will require the study. I don't know how they're going to guess at what those mitigation costs are if they haven't done the study. And therefore, they can't get congressional authorization until they do the study so they know what the costs are. Is that correct? Is the way it should be?
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
We'll make sure that we ask for that.
All right, any other questions from the panel?
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for the information. I think we really wanted to make sure that we kind of understand where everything is in the process at this point, and that we get the proper agencies and that's right, and then we get the municipalities who and various boards to go ahead and get some of those statements reissued, especially for the current project going forward. So thank you again for coming today, and we really appreciate your efforts, to manage the impacts on the Pearl. So
thank you, Senator.
So at this time, are there any other public comments? If not, I think that we're wrapped up here, unless anybody else has anything they would like to add. All right, we can go ahead and thank you, and thank you for everybody who came out to speak today. If have a motion to adjourn. So moved from Senator Baralt, and therefore we are officially adjourned.